Robert Childress was a drinker, and a gambler, and a brawler. Then one night in 1910, at the end of another spree, Childress found himself outside a Methodist church. He heard singing. There was a revival going on. Childress went inside and surprised himself by answering the altar call. The experience didn't make him a new man right away, but it gave him a new sense of peace. He stopped carrying his pistol. Eventually, instead of being someone you could count on to start a ruckus, he became the deputy the Patrick County Sheriff depended on to break up a ruckus. Then he became a preacher. Then he started building churches, 6 of them. Like so many destinations, we find this one, or should I say 6, began from a book recommended by my father-in-law titled The Man Who Moved a Mountain by Richard C. David. This biography of Reverend Bob Childress of the Blue Ridge Mountain has been compared to the tales of Mark Twain and the Mississippi. It tells of Childress's transforming effects on rough and wild mountain communities. He grew up, like so many mountain children of this time, with whiskey and violence as a part of everyday life. His profound personal transformation is legacy enough, but the physical legacy of the rock churches he built transformed mountain community after mountain community. The book about his life brings many travelers to the area to see the churches. Do you know what they're looking for other than just they're looking at the building and saying, I read the book and I just wanted to see what it looked like?
A lot of that. A lot of them will be on sort of a pilgrimage. And I've read the book about your grandfather, and I just wanted to come and see the churches in person and find, or hear one of the generations speak, because right now I'm the only 3rd generation that's become a pastor.
A couple of interesting tales about Reverend Childress stand out. One was a tale of poverty, and once in school, he and his siblings each ate only 1 biscuit for lunch, which came from a pail from their sister that packed lunch for everyone. And when she would ask them, have you had enough? Would you like another biscuit? They would all exclaim so the others could hear them, oh no, I am so full I couldn't eat another bite. The lunch pail, of course, was empty. Mountain people are proud, even the children. Another was the profound effect that the national newspaper reporting on the infamous Hillsville courtroom shooting tragedy of 1912 had on Bob Childress.
And it was the Sidney Allen family. There were a lot of brothers, and there was a murder, and then when it went to court, this massacre took place in the courthouse.
Oh my. Newspapers printed the worst of Appalachian stereotypes. One big city paper even called for the mountain people to accept either education or extermination. I believe Reverend Childress knew this reporting was exaggerated and an unfair depiction of his people. But he did see some room for change, and set out to not just change those stereotypes, but help his people by creating caring communities, trying to bring progress through roads, jobs, and churches to help them lead more productive lives. You told me that people ask you about the rock churches, the stories about them, or how they came to be and stuff, and you explained that. I don't know if it was a sermon or you said you had explained to it about Peter, how people stumbled over the rocks in the field and how you built them. So tell me a little about that, or tell me how that, I really like that.
Well, I've told some people, I think one of the most interesting aspects of the rock churches, and in this case I'm referring to the structures themselves now, not the congregations, is the fact that they convey the essence of my grandfather's life and ministry, much in the same manner that the biography, The Man Who Moved a Mountain, does. Now here's what I mean. In the 16th chapter of Matthew, I told you, of course, Jesus is having a conversation with his disciples. And he asked them, who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter, good old impetuous Peter, answers, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And of course, Jesus is happy with this answer, and he tells Peter, you are the rock upon which I will build my church. Then Jesus goes on to explain that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering and be crucified. And Peter is not going to have any of this nonsense. So he pulls Jesus to the side and rebukes him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you." Well, Jesus is not real happy with this reaction. So he in turn rebukes Peter by saying, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Thus, one minute, Peter is being described as the foundation of the church, and the next he's being contrasted to the greatest adversary of the church. Just like that, he had gone from being a building block to a stumbling block, or just like that, he had gone from being described as a rock upon which a firm foundation would be built, to being, I guess, the greatest hindrance to the church. And I think it's important for us to recognize that one and the same rock can fulfill both functions. And these rock churches attest to that fact. The congregations took ordinary field rocks, which were stumbling blocks to horses and to farmers, and they used them to build beautiful and enduring houses of worship. Same rock, different roles. Not talking about rock and roll here necessarily, though. But it does show that you can fulfill a different role. And what had happened, of course, they went from being cursed as a nuisance to now being praised for their beauty and their strength. And Peter had it in him, and you and I have it in us, to be the same. We can either be a building block for the kingdom, or we can be a stumbling block. And what makes the difference is God's will. If you seek and follow God's will for your life, then you are a building block. And if you try to do things your own way or try to give God advice, then you are a stumbling block. And my grandfather, he was just a man. In some ways, people say he was an extraordinary man, and I guess he was. But my grandfather was not perfect. He made his share of mistakes too. But I believe that he always tried to seek and follow God's will for his life. And thus God's Spirit transformed him in a miraculous way, if you've read the book, as I'm sure you have, from being a stumbling block into being a building block. And I think that's true of all of us. I think we all have the choice of either being a building block for God's kingdom or a stumbling block. And the difference is, do you seek and follow God's will for your life?
Do you find challenges with your last name? I mean, that's a pretty famous name and a big deal up here. So do people?
Yeah, Dan, I mean, it's one of those things that I think it's a blessing and a curse. There's no question that it's probably opened some doors for me. Yet, when I go to some of these places, you come in, we know your grandfather's ministry and your dad's ministry. We know we're going to hear a great sermon. And so, don't put any pressure on me. People sign that guest register. And one time we went and counted it up, and the last 33 people that had signed that book represented 13 states in Canada.